Why are you wrestling around for sheet metal every time I call you today?
Dude, that is such a complicated answer. Is it okay if I eat an ice cream cone while we talk?
Yeah, I can live with it. Just make it disgusting. Because I don't know if you remember, but one time I ate an oatmeal cream pie and you got all upset, and I want to prove to you that I won't. So make it real disgusting.
Oh, I won't make it disgusting. So anyway, basically, I need sheet metal because of what I'm working on for my studies at school.
Okay.
Did you get the videos I sent you earlier just to show you?
Yeah, but I haven't opened them because I wanted to wait in case you wanted to explain something to me.
Oh, cool. Check those out. Yeah, open it up.
All right, I'm opening that up right now.
Oh, man, it's something I've been fighting for months now. I'm doing a dissertation, which is like when you do the PhD thing, you try to find something to make people smarter, like humanity.
Yeah.
The problem is, in order to get to that level, I have to learn a lot before I can even get there. And so I did a video a while back where David Linderman and we shot 2 bullets at each other and they smashed nose on.
And you just did that dual style, like Hamilton and Burr? You just paced it off and you both wore like helmets and goggles and just made it happen?
No. We talked about that on I was there at your place. We talked about bullet versus bullet. But basically, electric primers, and we timed it up so that the bullets would hit nose to nose.
And it worked.
Yeah, it worked. And so in order to do something else I'm trying to do for the dissertation, I wanted to learn how to simulate that engagement. Meaning, is there a way I can use computers to recreate that event in such a way that perfectly models it? And it seems like, we live in the computer age, the information age. Of course we can do that. Oh no, it is way more difficult to do that than I ever imagined. And I've been walking down this road for quite some time now trying to figure this out.
Okay, I want to back you up a little bit. Just before I look, I want to back you up a little bit. No, it does not seem to me that because we live in the computer age that you would just be able to simulate what happens when 2 bullets smash together. Like, it doesn't seem like you could just walk up to a computer and be like, okay, computer, simulate 2 bullets smashing together in every way realistically, because, I mean, every video game that involves action is built on some sort of physics engine, some sort of physics system, and you try to make them realistic, but everybody's played a video game and seen much simpler things than a bullet smashing into a bullet at crazy speeds go completely wrong. And people can't fall off a cliff, or a car just can't be parked next to that curb. As someone who's played a few video games, I would say that I'm not surprised at all that this is not easy or automatic. Now, I do imagine that there's some video game physics engine that could have 2 bullets operating within the parameters of their imagined world smashed together and something would happen. But you're not trying to do that. You're trying to simulate exactly like our world with 1G gravity and all of our parameters. And that's why I'm not surprised at all to hear that this is very hard.
Yeah, I'm not using gravity in the simulation, but I'm trying to do everything else. And the most difficult thing to do is how the materials fail. Like, if you have a metal and you pull it, it will break if you pull it hard enough. And the amount of force you have to put on it is a function of the cross-sectional area of the thing you're pulling. Like, let's say you have a rod, like a round rod, like rebar.
Like a dowel. Okay, sure, like rebar. All right, I'm
a dowel.
it.
That's a great way to say it.
And I have it in
and you just pull.
both of my hands, and I'm much stronger than I actually am. And you're telling me to pull on both ends of the rebar and pull it apart long ways.
Yep.
It's not working.
Let's imagine that was made out of Play-Doh. You could do it, right? If you did it, what would happen before it broke? It wouldn't just like snap. It would do what?
No, it would become elastic, and gravity would cause it to droop in the middle. And it would thread out into a bunch of components that for whatever reason were a little more tightly packed, and that my force of pulling wasn't affecting as rapidly as the parts that were functioning more as structural tendons in this Play-Doh glob. So the more structural stuff would probably come apart more quickly. The stuff that wasn't doing much or carrying much weight is going to string out, and then it's all just going to melt and fall down and I think it'll ultimately be the gravity that causes the last bit of it to pull apart.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So that act of stretching it out and it getting smaller, like the diameter in the middle getting smaller, is called necking. Just like
necking, like what old people used to do at drive-in movie theaters?
Exactly.
Okay, perfect. I get it.
No, it's like the diameter will just kind of go down, kind of like between your shoulders and your head, your neck is smaller. I've always thought that was interesting. Like there are certain parts of your body that are smaller than the thing more distal from it, further away. So like your wrists, for example, that's why handcuffs work. So I've always wondered what it would be like to have like bodies that just taper away from the middle. You couldn't handcuff somebody like that, could you?
No, I guess I've never. Like if somebody had spear hands that were perfect,
like they're starfish,
like a starfish, or like the whichever Terminator that turned into metal and he had pointer hands. How do you cuff that guy?
I know, right? I know. I always thought that was neat. Anyway, so this rod will neck down,
okay,
and then it will break, and every material actually has what's called a stress strain curve, like every solid material. So stress is the amount of force that you're pulling on something divided by the cross-sectional area.
Okay, hold up. Nope.
So
let me make sure I get stress.
Yeah.
The amount of force, so I got the rebar, I'm pulling it apart. Even if it's not breaking, I'm still applying stress. Even if it's very minimal stress relative to the strength of the item, I'm applying stress, and that stress is, one more time, tell me again.
So if you're pulling at 100 pounds of force,
okay,
and the cross-sectional area of this dowel is 1 square inch, then the stress in that dowel would be 100 pounds per square inch.
Oh, okay.
So, and so if you're pulling at 200 pounds, and the cross-sectional area is half of a square inch, what would the stress be?
Okay, I'm pulling at 100, and it's 1 square inch.
You're pulling at 200 now.
It is 1. Now I'm pulling at 200, but it's half.
Yeah.
Okay, that would be more stress.
Yeah.
So that takes it up to, is that 4?
Yeah, 400 pounds per square inch. You're really smart, dude.
I don't know about that.
You could easily do the engineering thing. That's it. You now know how to calculate stress. So it's the force divided by the area.
Force divided by the area. Okay. So the fatter the thing, I mean, this is just common sense. I can intuit this, but you're giving me the universal language, the matrix, the source code of the universe here.
Vocabulary.
The fatter the thing, the less stress I'm applying when I put both my hands on it and try to yank it apart.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And so
it makes perfect sense.
That's stress. Now, strain is a little bit different. Strain is the stretch. Like, how much does it stretch? Does that make sense?
Okay, sure. In this case, none. There's got to be some kind of point, some sort of tipping point, inflection point that you have to reach as a minimum for any given thickness and strength before any measurable strain is applied. So for example, a really skinny piece of rebar, even if it feels like I'm doing nothing, but I pull apart as hard as I can, there would be some microscopic level of observable strain being applied.
That's actually the word. It's microstrain. Yeah.
Oh, okay. But there would also be a thick enough piece of metal that I could still get my hands on, that I could pull, and it would just simply be unobservable using the technology we have to observe strain. It just wouldn't move. So I assume there is some point at which strain begins to manifest, and then I would assume it is a logarithmic curve that goes aggressively up from there once you reach that inflection point where it begins to actually inflict observable strain on an item. Is that fair?
Close enough. Yeah, it's not really logarithmic, it's linear. And like if you pull something and then you release, it'll go back to normal, right? So that's elastic.
That's not the case. Like, I don't know. I've got socks that lose their elasticity and it doesn't always go back to normal, right?
Yeah, but like almost everything, let's take that 1 square inch diameter rod. If you pull it, it'll stretch just a little bit and then you release it and it'll just go back. That's called the elastic region.
Okay.
But if you pull it hard enough and it starts necking, then you're in the plastic regime.
I've heard that term. Okay, that's where we get, okay, got it. And once you are into the plastic realm, unless it is a very unique substance, well, no, once you're into the truly plastic realm, it doesn't matter what the substance is. It's not going to rebound. It's not going to go back to what it was. Right?
Not all the way. Yeah, it'll go back a little bit, but it might not go all the way back. Yeah.
So what has actually changed in this? Like, let's say I have incredible strength and I'm pulling on this 1-inch piece of rebar and I get it past the, what did you say it was again? The elastic tolerances?
Yeah, you're moving into the plastic regime. Yeah.
Now I get into the plastic deformation. What is changing inside of it that makes it so that it deforms and will not snap back to what it was? What did I do to it?
That's a great question. And the answer is you're realigning the crystals.
What?
That's a great question, dude.
You sound like John Denver or Enya.
I don't know what that means. But it's, dude.
1979 New Age joke.
So there's a lot of crystals in there, depending on, I mean, some things are amorphous, but let's just talk about metals. There's crystals in there, and as you pull it, those crystals will slide and realign, and there's these magic things called dislocations. And these dislocations will move, and depending on the shape of the crystal, there's all different types of shape of crystals that it's too complicated to go into right now. But like, yeah, you're just sliding the crystals, and once you start sliding them, they still want to hold each other, but they release just a little bit, and things start moving around.
So in the case of rebar, we're talking about Fe. What else is in rebar? It's an alloy, I assume. It's not just iron, right?
Yeah. Steel is iron, and you got some carbon in there and all kinds of stuff. Like, depending on what kind of steel it is. Okay, now you're getting into another thing. Alloys behave differently. Here's the problem I'm working on. So, brass, for example, is copper and zinc.
Okay. So let's say we have a brass monkey, and we have inflicted we've gone into the plastic realm. What is happening there that is different than just pure iron?
I have no idea.
Okay. Okay. Let me just make sure I'm still with you, because you're explaining fancy PhD level things, and I genuinely want to try to understand what you're working on. So let me just quick reset.
Okay.
Everything's made of crystals at some level, and I assume they're not the same in their structure depending on what element or elements are present, but somehow that crystalline structure, which exists at the submolecular level, somehow that can be affected by stress and strain, and whatever part of that crystalline structure is affected to the point of plasticity. If you put a microscope on that crystalline structure would not look the same as it did before it went past its elastic tolerance. Now it looks weakened or broken at some microscopic level. Am I tracking with you?
Yeah, except it's not submolecular level. It's bigger than the molecules.
Oh,
but
okay.
It's like these metals are atoms, right? And the atoms are arranged in certain orders depending on how big the atoms are and how they interact with other things. And so you can have like there's these different crystal structures. I mean, there's some called body-centered cubic. There's some called HCP, hexagon close packed. There's all these different crystal face-centered cubic. There's different crystal structures, and they behave differently based on the shape of the atoms and how they interact with things, and if there's other atoms crammed in between them and stuff like that. So I would say it's not really molecules. I mean, sometimes it's molecules we're dealing with, but we're just talking about metal right now. It's more atomic arrangement is what it is. But yeah, I mean, you pretty much got it. I mean, that's it.
But what you're describing to me is, this is just big picture here. You are describing the ultra pinch zoomed in physical reality of every single metal that I come into contact with. If you take it all the way down, it's some kind of crystalline structure made up of a whole bunch of one atom or a mixture of a few different types of atoms, different types of elements. And when they get together, part of the reason that metal has the properties that we just intuitively think of as metal is because of the way it crystallizes up to give it its rigidity, its properties, its flexibility, its lack thereof. So if I'm hearing you right, this is the invisible world of metal that we don't see, but we do intuit.
Yeah. Okay. So man, this is cool. One of the things I like about when we talk about your stuff I ask you about history stuff all the time. You ask me these fundamental questions and it makes me realize, man, this is pretty cool. And it is pretty intuitive once you start. Anyway, so crystals. Have you ever gotten ice cream out, like that ice cream kind of just ate? You get the ice cream out of the fridge and you scoop you some in a bowl and then you leave it out on the counter for a few minutes because maybe like the family wants some too. And then you go put it back in the freezer. You ever done that?
You don't do that. That doesn't work.
What? Why don't you do that?
It's never the same. I know some people try it, but I can tell. You could put a bandana over my eyes and give me 2 shakes of the soft serve Butterfinger malts shakes of the same consistency, the same temperature. You could be like 1 bite of each. Tell me which one got a little melted and refrozen, and I could tell you because I can taste the crunch. The texture is all wrong. It still tastes like ice cream, but fundamentally it is changed, and there is no making it what it was ever again.
Do you know why?
Okay, here's my working theory, and this maybe doesn't contribute to our conversation, but I'm just going to try to honestly answer your question. My understanding is that ice cream is measured by the amount of air, oxygen that is injected into the ice cream. So you have light ice cream, like McDonald's is mostly air. You have heavier soft serve ice cream, and I suspect that at some level, the sugar and the other stuff that's in there is mingling with the oxygen to form a consistency that you like when it comes out of the machine. But when that melts, the oxygen leaves, it recrystallizes or it reforms in a new way, but without the same amount of oxygen. And so it takes on a fundamentally different texture because the composition of it actually has changed.
That's what I always thought too.
Dang it.
But
being right is so much cooler than being wrong. Okay, tell me what it actually is.
That's not true. So there was this graduate TA when I was taking my materials class at Bama like 20-something years ago, and he kept talking about fudge. I was like, what is he talking about? And he said, has your mom ever made fudge? And I'm like, yeah, but I just kind of eat it. And he goes, how does the fudge taste? And I was like chocolate. He's like, no, like mouthfeel. What's it like? And I said, it's creamy. He's like, right, it's creamy. And it's really smooth. And he goes, well, what happens if, and he starts explaining the ice cream thing. Have you ever had Dippin' Dots? You've had Dippin' Dots,
I
right?
Have. Yeah.
You know how they make Dippin' Dots, right?
No clue. Always wondered. I always assume it's like some super freeze, dry ice, like crazy cold kind of thing.
Yeah, they flash freeze it. So here's the deal. The faster you solidify something, the smaller the crystals will be.
Smaller crystals more fragile or smaller crystals more durable?
Smaller crystals are more creamy. Let's just go. Let's go with that for this. Yeah, we're still on ice cream.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
All right. So you eat ice cream and it's creamy. You leave it on the counter and it melts, and then you put it back in the fridge and it refreezes. The crystals are big and it's not as creamy because you didn't freeze it as fast as they did at the manufacturing facility.
So if I could match the specifications of whatever did the freezing at the ice cream shop, I could refreeze it to be the same?
Yeah. Yeah, if you had some crazy fast flash freeze mechanism in your house, yeah, you could make super creamy ice cream.
No, I disagree with you, and I think you're wrong. And here's why I think you're wrong. Because melting isn't just about crystalline structure. It's also about an uneven redistribution of the elements that had been crystallized. Even if I flash froze that shake, it has still begun the process of sifting itself out into its component parts as it melts. And I don't think that just a flash freeze alone is going to undo that. It's not going to add gravity or air back into the mix. I really do think something has changed, and it might keep the crystals off of it, but I don't think it would reform and taste the same as it did, even if you perfectly matched the rate of freeze from the store. Tell me why I'm wrong.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to tell you why you're wrong. You might be right, but I will give you a couple of more things to think about.
I'd like that.
So think about I'm trying to figure out which one I want to go with first. Think about a blacksmith. You've seen TV shows with blacksmiths, or maybe like a Settler's Day or something. You got a blacksmith out there bending nails and stuff. You ever seen that?
Absolutely. I've seen it several times, and I've watched very closely.
So he gets a hammer and he starts hammering on the metal, and maybe he flips it 90 degrees back and forth. And the more have you ever seen a blacksmith heat up metal red hot just with a hammer?
Just with a hammer? No.
Only with a hammer. I've seen him do it. It's amazing. Well, maybe not red hot, but I've seen him just hit some metal really, really hard and bend it, and then turn it 90 degrees and hit it again. And if you do that hard enough and quick enough, you can just heat up the metal just with friction. It's awesome.
That's all frictional heat?
Yeah, they can do it. They can do that. It's pretty neat.
Okay.
So,
I saw the guy that made a video where he made a machine that had like 10 gloves on it that would just spin in place, and he tried to cook a chicken by slapping it with gloves.
Yeah.
I think like it just destroyed the chicken into tiny little gross bloody chicken parts. It never, maybe it cooked it. He said he was going to make another video. I never saw the next video. But yes,
Valiant
I did.
effort.
I mean, I know friction can heat things. It had just never occurred to me that you could go red hot with a hammer and a piece of scrap metal. But I mean, I believe you.
Yeah, you can do it. So what does a blacksmith do after he's got the metal? It's really red hot and he's got it shaped perfectly, and then he's ready to lock it in. What does he do?
He flash cools it in a bucket of water. Yeah,
sometimes not water. Sometimes oil.
Oh, yeah,
you ever seen him use oil?
Yeah, I suppose I have.
Motor oil?
Yeah, and then you get the sparkle and the spittle, but you also get a different look to the blade. I mean, that's part of why Damascus steel looks different than other kinds too, right? It's the actual treatment they put it in.
No, Damascus steel is a result of folding the metal many, many times, and you fold like high carbon steel in with different alloys. You fold them together. That's what makes
Damascus produces the color, the waves through it.
Yeah, it's laminated. It's a bunch of different layers, and the layers have different types of strengths. That's my understanding.
You know what I might have been seeing was somebody who was demonstrating how to imitate that by flash cooling inferior unfolded metal into like, have you seen those? Like sometimes people take car rims and they do this dip treatment and they pull it out and it puts an interesting pattern on there. I can't remember what that's called.
Yeah.
But I think the video I saw then was somebody showing how to fake the Damascus steel look with that kind of trick. So I think that's making sense. I think I'm hearing you.
Yeah, that's cool. No, this is different. So the reason you quench it is the word. The reason you would quench the metal in oil rather than water is because as soon as the water hits the boiling point, it will turn to steam. And so then if you think about inside the bucket there, there's like a layer of steam around the blade, and it can only take away so much heat. But if you do it in oil, the boiling point is much higher, and you can dump more heat off the blade. Yeah.
Yeah. So if
that makes
what liquid has a lower boiling point than water? Is alcohol lower than water?
Helium. I don't know. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm sure.
So
alcohol
it could
does.
So it could go the other way too. If you had something that had a lower boiling point, you would get a larger vapor barrier, and it would be even less effective than water. But with oil, you're saying it reduces that burn off vapor barrier down to next to nothing, and it keeps that flash. Never thought of that.
I wonder what the best quenching fluid is. There's got to be something like mercury or something, like something
Gatorade,
that will get the heat away real fast.
Something with a lot of electrolytes.
I don't know. But the reason you quench things, like the blacksmith will quench things, is he's trying to get those really small crystals. And so I'm not smart enough to know crystal size and what's good and what's bad, but I do know that you can quench things to make really small metal crystals, and sometimes you'll hear it called heat treating, right? So you heat treat some metal. Another thing you can do is annealing. Have you heard of annealing?
Yeah, but I don't know what that means.
Annealing means you put it in an oven and you bake it over a really long period of time, and then you cool it off over a long period of time. That's annealing.
What is that commonly done to? You have annealed glass? Okay, that's where is that like windshield glass? Is it annealed?
No, it is, but that's not the only thing that's done to it, but metal can be annealed as well. And the reason you do that is you want to remove all the stress, the internal stresses from the structure. So if you take something and you fold it really hard, like in a press or something, and you create a break, like a kink right in the middle of the thing, then there's going to be internal stresses in there, and you can kind of imagine what those stresses look like, right? Yeah. Well, then those crystals are like, some of them are stretched and some of them are pressed. Then you go anneal it, and that relieves that stress in the metal, and that's what you're doing there.
And every time civilizations have figured out a new way to treat metal, I guess it opens a whole new part of the civilization advancement tree, because now there's stuff you can do that you couldn't. Like, we can make a metal stick that goes 13 feet high, but any higher than that with our current way that we treat metal, and it falls over in a big windstorm, or it breaks when you do this, or we can't put that much weight on it. But now Civilization X discovers annealing, and now we can make metal poles that can give in the wind, but they don't exceed their elasticity parameters, and they can be 50 feet high. And now you can have a 50-foot high pole, and that enables you to do some new thing that you couldn't otherwise do. And you fast forward all the way to now, and somebody's parking a skyscraper-sized rocket in a coupling and using it again. It seems inconsequential. Like, for me and the things I use metal for, I don't know, metal just feels like metal. It's all hard. It's stiff enough. It would get hurt if you got stabbed, or you'd get hurt if you got stabbed by it. But that's kind of it. But the level of precision that you're talking about is so far beyond that in terms of, these tolerances of different kinds of treated metal. Changes everything about the applications that you can use that metal for.
Dude, you just sent me, I've got my laptop here, and I just went down this huge rabbit hole as you were talking about these advancements, because you made me realize, wow, yeah, this is like, first of all, how do you melt the metal or whatever? And then how do you figure out all these different things, and people mixed alloys together? And then I'm sorry. I did the thing where I was thinking as you were talking, and I feel bad about that.
Yeah, you got the gist of it in the first 2 seconds of my comment. So did the third share. I'm not offended. It's all right.
Here's the question I was thinking about, because you brought it up. So the highest melting point I've heard metal-wise is tungsten. So my question is, what do you hold tungsten in when you melt it? And I had to look that up.
Heavily oxygenated fuel.
I had to look that up.
I mean, you just got to be pumping unbelievable amounts of oxygen into whatever fuel you're using to superheat that.
Well, they said there's some kind of special refractory metals that they use to make bowls to melt tungsten. So
I wonder if the fires of Mount Doom. Water. I wonder if liquid tungsten is what gurgled in Mount Doom.
I wonder if liquid tungsten is the best thing to quench your sword in.
I think that sword would be rad.
Well, the sword would probably be too brittle. It'd probably be too hard. You don't want anything to be too hard, because it would break. You want it to be like flexible, but be able to hold an edge. So like, you want it hard on the outside to be able to cut, but you want it flexible on the inside.
Man, but if you're talking about swords, that changes so much about your technique. Like, because then you have to account for that flexibility. I mean, those inches of flex are life and death. You see, for example, somebody that uses like a super flexible 6 or 8 foot pike. It exists both in the West and in the East. It's long, metallic. I mean, sometimes it's made wood with a metallic tip, but the amount of flexibility on those things, I mean, you're talking 6 feet of flex with this thing, and it's on purpose. You don't just get that weapon for free in your civilization because you discovered metal. You've got to figure out how to make it to that point. And
did you say 6 feet of flex?
Yes, it's insane. I don't know what you call the weapon. There's usually like fur on the tip of this kind of a lance, and you'll see people wield it like over their shoulders, like over both shoulders. It's just crazy. You look at it, and it just looks like a silly, demonstration, like nunchucks. Who's actually going to fight somebody with nunchucks? Like, clearly it's just silly and for show. And it looks like that's what this weapon would be at first glance when you see somebody do a demonstration with it. But then you think about it, and you're going, that would be very difficult to anticipate and defend in real time. It's almost like a propeller whipping back and forth. That the stinging edge of that weapon would be so difficult to defend. That arc would be so hard to get inside of. But again, you don't get it for free. you've got to figure out what metal can have that kind of flex, or what metal and wood combination can do that. And then on top of that, you got to apply the same principles to how you treat the wood. If you go with a wood shaft, you don't just cut it out of a tree and it works. I assume you have to treat that or cut it at a certain age as well.
You're absolutely right. This technological, dude, I'm kind of at a loss for words because my brain's going in so many different directions based on what you just said. Do you have the video I sent you? Do you have the videos I sent you?
I still haven't looked at it. All right, what do you want me to do?
Open the video and just look at it.
Okay, I have two. One is blue and one is gold and silver.
Just look at the gold and silver one first.
All right, gold and silver. Okay. Huh. Well, isn't that quite the thing? Okay, oh, wait, there's more. Okay, can I describe what I'm seeing, or am I going to ruin it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, what I'm seeing are two bullets. They're not real pointy. They look like 9mm to me. I don't know, something predictable. And as I watch the
45.
video, the gold is on the right, and so close to the same thing. The gold is on the right, the silver is on the left. Now they are being mushed together, and they're doing exactly what I would expect two bullets to do when mushing together, even if I had not ever seen your video, which is I expect that force to go out. I expect something that looks like a supernova to happen. Just the force can't keep going forward because it's two objects moving in perfectly vector opposite directions with the same mass at the exact same speed in this simulation. And so where is all that mass supposed to go now? Neither can go forward. So the release point for the pressure is going to be out. So it looks like a space explosion. The bullets they're like liquefied and they're moving out in an even pattern. That's what I'm seeing.
Okay, what are you seeing inside the bullets before it starts smushing?
I mean, watch again.
What does it look like?
I'm going to bigify this a little bit. All right, you've got this grid in there. Oh my. I see shockwaves rolling through the bullet and disrupting what maybe is the crystalline structure. It looks like each bullet. Okay, I'm inching through this. Here comes the shockwave. They're impacting, they're mushing up, mushing. There's the shockwave, but the shockwave isn't starting from the impact point. It's starting from the back end.
So those aren't actually shockwaves. What those are a Mourier pattern, but basically you're seeing a bunch of elements inside the bullet, right? It looks like the bullet's divided up into a bunch of little cubes.
It's a cross section. It looks like a bunch of little cubes. Yeah, sure. Great way to describe it. Sure.
All right. So basically, this is what's called a finite element analysis. So what you do is you take a thing and you divide it up in a bunch of little things. This software that I'm running here is called LS Dyna, and I'm running it through what's called ANSYS. They gave me a seat of it to work on the PhD stuff. But basically, with a finite element analysis, what you do is you take a big thing and you divide it up into smaller things because it's easier to do math on smaller things.
All right.
And you say, okay, well, if I've got 300,000 cubes and they're stacked up here, if I push on this one on this corner, well, that's going to push on these 3 cubes to the left of it, and that's going to push on these, and that's going to push on these. And so you kind of propagate the force all the way through the thing. You do an analysis on each finite element, each individual discrete object, and then you assume those objects are a part of a bigger object, and then you do all the math, and then you step it forward in time, like a few picoseconds or something like that. And then you do all the math again, and then you step it forward in time, and then you do the math and step it forward in time. And because you know that stress is equal to force divided by area, because of the pulling the rod thing we talked about earlier, you can calculate the stress at any point.
Stress is equal to force divided by area. Okay. At any point in either bullet.
Yes, you can calculate the stress at any point in these bullets.
I mean, I'm sitting here watching it on repeat, and I believe you. I have no idea how the software works or how much you can pinch zoom, so to speak, in on any of these particular points, but big picture, I'm seeing that. So this is my question.
So look at the next one. Look at the blue video.
All right, I won't forget my question. Oh,
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you're fine. All right, it's 2 blue bullets, same shape. They are impacting. This is so hard to describe, dude.
Right. It looks like 2 worlds colliding, doesn't it? So
it does, and it looks like 2 black holes being formed. I mean, it looks like the back end of the bullets are creating this weird inversion, like this tube that you would travel through in like a wormhole in a sci-fi show or something. I mean, if you made 2 golf ball sized 9mm, you said they were 45 millimeter rounds. Well, not rounds, just bullets. These are fired, so there's no shell, there's no gunpowder or anything. It's just a bullet. And you somehow connected them to your left hand and your right hand. And then with as precise a timing as you could muster, you started clear out wider than shoulder width apart, and you clapped. They are doing mostly intuitively what I would imagine is happening here, which is mushing out to the sides. But what I can't simulate, because my hand is continuing to drive the bullets, what I can't simulate is what I'm seeing here on the back end of the impact of each bullet. And that is this weird vortex, this weird void that is forming and running toward the point of impact until at some point material from right at the point of impact pokes its head out of the newly formed void. I'm doing a terrible job. This is awful radio. Everybody's got to be so frustrated by what I'm saying because this is really hard to describe.
Basically, the bullets slap together and then they spread out radially, and then on the back of each bullet, a little nipple pops out. Right?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Eventually, after there's a void for a while, then a nipple.
Yeah, exactly. And so what you're seeing here is a simulation that's only about 150 microseconds worth of time. You can see the time up in the top left.
How many microseconds is a second?
1 million microseconds is a second. And so 150 millionths of a second is what you're looking at. It took my computer 4.5 days to run this simulation because you're having to go through each individual little element and calculate it. But the hard part is you had to know how all the metals work together. The reason this is so interesting to me, based on what you just said a minute ago about the history stuff, is you said once one army would figure out, their metallurgist or their magi or whoever their magic men were, once they figured out a new way to smelt ore and to treat it and get it into a final form, once they figured that out, they had magic, right? And they had a superior weapon that could go against another army, right?
Think about what that was like in the field, man. Your swords look the same because you're from rival neighboring cultures, and you both, you're descended from the same family tree. So you're wielding weapons that look the same, and you fought each other. This is a rival people group. You raid each other every spring, right? But in the off season one year, the metallurgists, they figure out the next advancement. And now all the swords for Team A get reforged, and they line up to fight against the usual suspects, Team B. And they run into the field, Team B having no idea what is about to hit them. And they charge each other, and they all rear back their swords, and they clang together for the first time. And Team B all simultaneously has this moment of realization. That doesn't feel like the last time we clanged swords. That feels completely different. Also, look at my sword now. And then the terror sets in. It's science-induced terror. And they can't tell you what happened or how it felt different in their hand and their wrist and the shiver it sent through their body. But they know that last time they clanged swords, it felt like hitting it in the sweet spot with a nice baseball bat. And the next time it felt like when you get it right off the end and it sends the vibration all the way down. And they know that somehow this ends up with, I'm dead. There's a moment like that in history. I promise you. That happened.
Oh, yeah. That's amazing. And so look back at the gold and silver animation there.
All right. Yeah.
So what you're looking at is what's called an explicit model. It's an impact simulation. And the outer colors, the darker colors on the outside of the bullets, that's copper. That's a very specific copper. It is 90% copper and 10% zinc. The stuff on the inside, of course, is lead, and I'm going to be so impressed if you know this. I didn't know this. Do you happen to know what metal they put in lead to make it just a little bit harder? Any idea? Don't spend a lot of time thinking about this.
Cobalt.
Antimony. Like, what have you ever heard?
Like what you pay when you get divorced?
No.
Here's just a little bit of vitriol mixed in with this bullet. Antimony? I didn't even know, dude, I didn't even know that was a thing.
Right? Antimony. It's on the periodic table, SB.
Really? What number is that?
Yeah,
You're making up elements.
At some point, humans decided, if we take our 100% lead bullets and we add about 3% antimony to this, we're going to get way better bullets. So about 3% antimony, atomic number 51, into your lead makes your bullet hit harder. Huh?
It's SE? What did you say it is?
SB, Sierra Bravo. Yeah, SB, antimony.
SB is antimony. It does sound made up. To me, it just sounds like hokum. I'm not sure that's a real thing. South Dakotium. I don't know. But okay, if you say so.
Yeah, she's on the periodic table. The thing that was so hard about this, about what you're seeing, first of all, just getting it set up and running. Doing a model like this is incredibly difficult, and I'm at the limit of what I can do, like mentally. The first thing is learning the vocabulary to even ask the questions, and then you have to go find the people to ask the questions from, and then you go look at the research. And this is what I've discovered. The actual metals that made this particular bullet, this is a Hornady bullet. It's a company in Nebraska. I think it's Nebraska.
Grand Island, Nebraska.
Is it really?
It sure is. Yeah, Margaret Hornady was the mayor of Grand Island for a long time.
Are you being serious right now?
Dead serious. I probably know some of the people who made this bullet. I know people who work there. Are you
serious?
Yeah, I'm not kidding at all. Mm-hmm.
Margaret Hornady was the mayor.
It's funny, you were about to do the, I don't know if you mean this. I can't tell if you're being sarcastic. No sarcasm. Margaret Hornady was the mayor of Grand Island, Nebraska. Yeah, of the Hornady family. Mm-hmm.
Daughter, Margaret Hornady. What? She's on the website.
I told you.
Oh, man. Whitman, color me impressed. That's amazing. Okay, great. That's incredible. All right. So, I've had conversations with the people at the manufacturing plant, and it's all out there I'm not telling any of their secrets. Like, this information's out there. The hardest part of doing this model, after you figure out how to set it up, and after thank you, ANSYS, for giving me a license for LS Dyna, by the way. And after you get people to help you learn how to use the software, thank you, Luis, who helped me. He's up in, I think, Massachusetts. Thank you, Luis, for helping me learn how to use the software. You have to figure out the material properties. And this is what I've learned doing this research for the dissertation that's so fascinating, dude. I don't know what to do with this, but I realized I'm at the edge. I'm like way out there on the edge of learning, like in this very, very narrow field. And the thing that's most difficult is to learn the material properties of the metals that I'm modeling. Basically, in order to do this simulation, you have to learn how the metal breaks. So go all the way back to the beginning of our conversation. You take the rod and you pull it.
Yeah.
And you have the elastic regime and you have the plastic regime.
Okay.
Well, that's what I knew engineering failure to be. I was wrong. There's an entire other level. Like, it's an order of magnitude more complicated. Like, every engineering student that I've ever talked to, the stress strain curves. Yeah, you calculate Young's modulus and you can, what's the Poisson ratio of that metal? Like, we know the language and we know all the stuff. And then you realize, wait a second, what strain rate are we talking about? Because if I do quasi-static, and I'm just really slowly pulling that thing, you're pulling the dowel apart really slowly, it's going to neck at a certain rate. But if you do it stupid fast, then you have to worry about things like, depending on how fast, the speed of sound in the material.
Huh?
The speed of push. The speed of pull. Because those atoms have to react to each other. And so you have this whole other thing called Hugoniot shock theory. And you have to do all this stuff. And I didn't know any of it. But there's this really fancy pants thing called the Johnson-Cook failure criteria, where these two guys a long time ago worked for the Air Force, I think. They figured out, hey, we can parameterize everything that a material can do down to these like 5 numbers. Every material has these numbers, and you can just figure it out. And you figure it out by doing this test that costs $50,000. We're going to pull it slow, we're going to pull it fast, and we're going to pull it at different temperatures, and we're going to do all this stuff and put it into this matrix, and then out pops these numbers. Those numbers, I know I'm talking a lot, forgive me.
No, you're good.
Those numbers.
You're good. Chewing on it.
The Johnson-Cook criteria numbers, it's hard to find. And scientists want those numbers for every material that exists. Because if I get those numbers, okay, Matt, back to your Team A, Team B thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So instead of the battle taking place 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago, the battle's going to take place now. And you and I, or Team A and Team B, we're not actually trying to kill each other. We're just trying to knock each other's weapons down or whatever, right? So if I can get the material properties for these bullets, then I can model it and simulate what it would do against your bullets. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but you don't shoot bullets at each other very often. It's not the best defensive strategy.
Yeah, you're right. But you let me just say it this way. This stuff is important because it's important to know how things react under extremely high pressures, like explosions and stuff like that. So this factors into how shape charges perform. This factors into how blah, blah, blah. And so I might be able to figure out a certain metal is better for a warhead than you if I can do the modeling and simulation. I know I've dumped a lot on you now, but here's the thing.
Okay, go ahead.
So looking through the research and trying to find the material values for these properties, this is what I've learned. So for example, I know I need the alloy. I think it's called CU2100. I may be wrong about this, but long story short, 95% copper, 5% zinc. That's what I need. Can't find it anywhere in the literature. Can't find it. It's called gilding metal. But what I can find is 90% copper, 10% zinc. So that's what I'm using in this model here. And that's not what I actually shot and what went together. But I don't have the money to go get those numbers. When I started looking in the literature, I'm seeing scientists in Russia. I'm seeing scientists in China, scientists in Poland, scientists in France, all over the world doing bullet versus armor simulations. It's important to know, I know I'm shooting a bullet versus a bullet, but replace one of the bullets with armor. And then you get all the way back to that meeting on the battlefield thing that you just so eloquently talked about.
Yeah, and that to me seems like the really obvious application here. Huh.
Isn't that interesting?
Isn't it? Okay, here's where it takes my brain. You're getting close to, with enough processing power, being into the realm of random, or even further, into the realm of only God knows. So let's say, for example, meteor is an asteroid, it's flying through space, and we figure out it's going to hit the moon. We're like, all right, we got to save humanity. We can't get anybody off planet. There's no time. We got to figure out exactly where every single bit of the moon is going to hit the planet and see if on very short notice we can get some people where no moon or asteroid bits are going to wreck things. Well, it's unknowable. But it's not that it's unknowable. It's that it's too hard to calculate because it's too hard to figure out the composition of the projectile hurtling through space. And it's too hard to figure out the composition of the moon at every single turn. But theoretically, if you could know every single bit of what that asteroid is made of and everything about how it's traveling, what speed, what it's going to run into between now and the moon, and you could know every detail about the composition of the moon, and you had near infinite processing power, you could figure out what that thing that I just described, which is my attempt to come up with the most chaotic explosion I can possibly imagine, the most impossible to calculate thing ever. Well, if there's a God who knows all things and has infinite processing power, that would be enough to know where every single rock, pebble, and bit of energy is going to dissipate and discharge to upon impact. But if you could know all the pieces and you had near infinite processing power on your machine, you could figure out where all of the particles and all the debris and everything, even in an explosion that chaotic, could happen. It's not that it's unknowable. It's just too much to gather all the information for such a scenario. So we just have to hand it off to random. It'll blow up. Things will happen. It's chaos. But what you're looking at, these simulations running again and again in front of me here that you've sent me, that looks like chaos, but it's not actually chaos. You can kind of tell what's going to happen. And if you could generate the same impact at the same speed with the same thing again and again and again, that thing that looks to the naked eye to be completely chaotic is actually ordered.
Yeah.
And that messes with me.
Well, I don't know. I mean, you mentioned God in there. I'm coming around to the idea. Well, I mean, I'm not coming around to the idea. I'm just starting to grasp the idea that God doesn't exist in time at all. There's a chapter in Mere Christianity called Time and Beyond Time. Mm-hmm. And he talks about God being there in the future with you already, understanding where it's going. And so I'm just now starting to understand that. So I don't think about God as processing things. I think of him already being at the answer. When I'm running this simulation, I set it all up and I hit go, and it took 4.5 days for it to get this little 20-second clip you just watched.
Yeah.
But if you already have it rendered, you can just open it up and it's rendered. I kind of think of God as already having the rendered files. So,
yeah, but doesn't need to hit play either. And
right,
definitionally,
exactly.
If there's a God, that's what God is. God is the first cause and is better defined by what he isn't than what he is. He is not limited. He is not bound by time. He knows all things. He learns nothing, that is. He doesn't have to render. So any decision, if there is indeed a God, that would affect the chaotic whole, because any action God would take or anything that happens in the world, I mean, the world is kind of that bullet. The world is kind of that exploding moon scenario. Everything affects everything else down to these tiny microparticles that can't be known. And civilizations have called that fate or luck or happenstance or providence or God or whatever. But if God is truly infinite, there was no moment of choosing. It was always chosen. And God did not learn or pick in a linear time moment as you and I think of it, what would happen when that rock hit that rock, or when that bullet randomly smashed into that other bullet on a battlefield. It's not just that he didn't learn it before it happened, it's that he never learned it. He necessarily, as the unlimited being, always knew that and didn't ever have to queue up the knowledge to know it again. God is just very, very other. If indeed there is a God, and indeed God is the unlimited maker and sustainer of all things, if God is indeed essence and existence, it's just, it's not an exaggerated, that being is not like a superhero, like me or you, but still bound by things and can get distracted and has a finicky personality. That being is very, very, very other, if such a being exists, and I happen to think such a being does exist.
Yeah, I think God exists outside of time, like above time, so to speak. Not only is he the first cause, I think he's the uncaused cause, which is interesting.
Agreed.
So anyway, I just got to thinking about all this stuff, and I thought you would find it interesting. I'm running into problems of, like, I've heard people, when they're doing their research, I've heard them say, like, oh yeah, you have trash data, and like you have to try to make it work. And I've heard a bunch of people complain about different things. Some of the stuff I'm running into is I don't have a lot of people I can talk to about this stuff anymore. There's only a limited number of people that I know of that I can say, hey, what do I do here? There's a guy in Malaysia. His name is Amin Topa, Ameentopa, and he's done some crazy awesome simulations online. I found him, and he's helping me look at this stuff. That guy named Luis I was telling you about, he's helping me, but like it's a whole different vocabulary, man. But one of the things I found interesting is these material values. When you go looking in the literature and try to find it, I've gotten to the point where I can pull up a paper and I can say, okay, what are Johnson Cook properties for this bullet jacket or whatever? And I start looking at it. I was like, oh, this guy is using the Polish guy's numbers. Huh. And I'm to the point now where I can say,
yes.
Say now, he's using the Polish guy's numbers, but he made a typo. Like, he tried to use the guy's numbers, but he's got the wrong number. And I can go back and look at the other paper and be like, oh, yep, he screwed it up. And so...
Yep. Now, I read some book about first century Roman politics, and they say something about Pontius Pilate, and I'm like, oh, yeah, you're going off the tradition of that debunked 11th century French manuscript that just got translated into English, and before that, nobody knew about it. I know that one.
Yes.
I see what you're doing. Yeah, when you're around a discipline long enough, you start to know who thinks what and where people grabbed their information, and you can kind of start to tell when people just made crap up wholesale. Like, I don't have any idea. Let's just plug something in here. But it takes a lot to get there on any subject. And so I would usually have no way of knowing when people are doing that, but there's just a few things where I'd happen to catch it. Sounds like you got there.
I'm getting there. Like I'm just now getting to this point where I can be like, oh, cool. You're kind of like, this is bullcrap. Like your whole paper's like, if you made that big of a mistake on this paper, I don't really believe any of it. But the paper looks really fancy.
Dude, a minute ago when you were like, I don't have anybody to talk to about this. I'm running out of people. I thought you kind of meant emotionally. And I wanted to sort of reach out my hand verbally over. I was literally going to do this. I legitimately misunderstood. And I was going to be like, hey, dude, I'm always a phone call away, man. Oh, you wanted to talk about like the tensile strength of like a copper bullet. Oh, dude, I got no freaking idea. Call somebody else. I'm sorry. I can't help you in any way. I offer no emotional support. I need to go right now.
No, like if any of you know what mass scaling I should assume with my explicit model without trashing the data, I'd love to know. Like if you have damage coefficients D1 through D5 for CU95ZN5, I would love that. If you have that, I don't know, just send it to us somehow. That kind of stuff. There's just nobody to call.
I don't have any of that, but I've got a heart that cares and an ear that's willing to listen and shoulders that are pretty good at sharing a burden. So if any of that would help with your little bullet experiment, you just, let me know.
I appreciate that. No, the bullet thing is not what I'm actually doing. I'm just trying to write a paper on this, and the purpose of the bullets was to understand how to do the model, and then I'm rolling that forward into something else that I'm actually doing. But I figured this would be a really good way to start to understand stuff. And it made me realize that there's a lot of stuff going on. If you look at the papers out in the world, you can see who's working on new bullets. And you can see who's working on new armor. There's like a shadow war that's been going on since the dawn of time. How can we make our slings work better? How can we make our arrows shoot farther? That kind of stuff. You can see it. It's all there. Isn't that interesting?
Oh, is it ever? I don't know that you're necessarily contributing to that, but you are definitely piggybacking off of a lot of work right now of people who wanted to figure out how to make their bullets pointier.
Pointier.
I don't know your fancy science terms, egghead.
What is that in the background?
That is a sawzall, maybe a sander. That might be an army of orbital sanders attacking a nasty wall. Do you know, have you ever seen like where they take drywall mud and they're like, I don't really know how to drywall or texture, but if I just throw a crap ton of this mud on this wall and then make like a wiggly trowel shape with it, maybe that'll pass for art. Have you ever seen those that kind of texture? Okay, that's what happened to my house years ago, and we finally decided it's time to stop that. So I have men downstairs attacking all of that, and they made like a bubble boy environment down there with like taped off plastic walls with zippers you can walk. That looks all hazmat-y, like E.T. when they took over the house in E.T. And so I guess you're just going to hear orbital sanders, a whole course of them now. Maybe they'll stop soon. I don't know. I'm sorry for everything.
I wanted to address something, and I just wanted your opinion on it. And so we'll just deal with the noise there.
Okay, thank you.
But I got a lot of feedback on the fancy episode. Like a lot.
You did? I didn't really check the comments or anything to see if anybody had any opinions.
Shut up. You actually went and defended me somewhere.
I did.
So
I was like, what the heck? You can't attack his character. Come on. Yeah. Make fun of him, but he's a pretty nice guy. Like, he's just wrong about a song.
Wrong? You think I'm wrong?
Dude, you're dead wrong about the song. You're wrong about the song. It's a sweet, like, you're just wrong about the song. The last time you'd heard it clearly or thought about it was when you were a kid and you formed kid opinions about the song, but then we fully vetted the song together, and it's abundantly clear that the phrase, "Mama turned me out," does indeed mean what we fear it means. Like, it's a song about her being put out on the street to go and become a lady of the night at a very young age. That's what the song is about, man. It's okay. We fully explored the possibility it was something different. It's not. It's okay.
Okay. So I admit that it's possible. It's possible that that's the case. Okay. Yeah. I will say a tremendous amount of people told me I was wrong. And not only did they tell me I was wrong, they ridiculed me incessantly. Like, oh, little pat on the head. You're such a moron. You're an idiot. Also, it's kind of cute.
Yeah.
Fancy's a prostitute. Also, I go to church with you.
You got that in person, huh?
People at my church were like, that's adorable. It's adorable that you thought Fancy was just like, I still think she's kind of a Cinderella story. Man,
you get done reeling off the Apostles' Creed, and then they kind of lean over. Hey, buddy, she was definitely a hooker, man. Yeah, I'm telling you.
I will say this, dude. Like, when the attacks started coming, like, really hot and personal, and they did via email, text, all kinds of stuff, it took every fiber of my being when they would say, like, Fancy's a hooker. When they would say something like that, it took every fiber of my being not to just reply and say, your mom's a hooker. But I didn't do that.
No, and this doesn't count as having done that. That would be wrong. That kind of banter has no place on the internet. No. And it's worth saying a thing to point out what isn't going to be said around here. That's good.
Right.
No one should take that to heart. Agreed?
No, not at all.
No, not at all. I'm not going to lie, man. Okay, people started greeting me in public. Somebody was chatting with me who I didn't even know about some other stuff I do on the internet. And they're like, hey, before you go, what was Destin doing with the Fancy thing? Oh, yeah. I don't know. I can pass along any comments you might have. No, I just, how do you miss that? He's so smart. How do you miss that?
So very disappointed in him.
Dude,
so disappointed.
Personal disappointment expressed toward you at me in casual conversation with friends, like soirees and church and stuff. It was amazing how much your opinion on that 1992 Reba McEntire song really got through the armor for folks. That is the most negative feedback ever, including the Welcome to the Gun Show thing that made Kellogg's or whoever had the brand we worked with mad at us. I mean, that was off the charts.
There's a guy that I hadn't spoken to in, let me see, when's the last time we texted? The last time we texted was a very, very, very long time ago. And he just reached out and was like, blah, blah, blah. I mentioned blah, blah, blah. He said something, and then he said, I listened and smiled at your innocent interpretation of Fancy. Like, hey, just out of the blue, just gonna let you know you're a moron.
Okay, but now flip it around and think about my world. And think about how many comments I received over the course of 2 or 3 weeks of people being like, now the great thing about Matt, on the other hand, he knows a whore when he sees one. Now that guy, he knows. Like, wait, is that good? What are we doing here? How is this positive?
No, man. One of my favorite things about this podcast is being able to be wrong, and I am, and I'm okay with that. And I think Fancy is. I'm just going to double down here. I think Fancy is just like Cinderella, and
bless your heart, man. Bless your heart.
Bless my heart. All right.
I will offer this one more thing, though. Okay. Every single person who weighed in person or in writing over the Fancy episode to me, they all had one thing in common. They all listened to the entire episode all the way to the bitter end. Now I ask, would the same number of people have done that if you had taken a different position? And I would argue, no. That would have been a super boring episode. And if right from the beginning you'd been like, oh yeah, I know the song clearly, this is what happened there, then we would have gone and done the other episode that I had planned. I was kind of interested to see if you might bite, but that wasn't even the plan for the episode. You know that, right? We still haven't done the episode that we were going to do there. We still haven't even had that conversation because Fancy just took over. But the fact that there was controversy, oh my goodness, it was just, then it was on and then all the fun could happen.
I just texted you my favorite comment I received. People really like it when I'm wrong. I'll say that. But look at that last comment there. Do you see that? The one we got from a friend of the podcast?
That friend of the podcast is...
You can't say that into a microphone. You can't say that.
Well, people know this friend of the podcast. When you say friend of the podcast, that's someone who we've spoken with, and they sure had an opinion about your fancy takes.
I'll admit that's the only one that hurt. All right, cool. I'll let you go.
All right.